You won't believe what happened inside this courtroom. A judge made a decision that was supposed to send a powerful message, but within minutes, everything spiraled out of control. What started as a simple ruling turned into one of the most chaotic courtroom moments anyone had ever witnessed, and the person who ended up suffering the consequences wasn't the one you'd expect. This is a story about power, loyalty, fear, and the moment when the justice system itself seemed to crack under pressure. Marcus Thompson, known to millions of fans around the world as Blaze, wasn't just a rapper. He was a cultural icon. His music had dominated the charts for nearly a decade, and his record label, Diamond Life Records, had become one of the most influential names in hip-hop. But behind the platinum albums and sold-out tours, prosecutors painted a very different picture. They claimed that Diamond Life wasn't just a record label. They alleged it was a front for a dangerous criminal organization responsible for violence, drug trafficking, and a trail of destruction that stretched across the city of Millbrook. In the summer of 2022, Marcus Thompson was indicted under the state's powerful anti-racketeering law. The charges were severe. Prosecutors accused him of being the leader of a criminal street gang that operated under the Diamond Life name. They claimed the same crew that made hit records also made victims. And now, after years of investigation, they were ready to prove it in court. The trial had been going on for months, and tensions were running high on both sides. The prosecution had promised explosive testimony from insiders who would expose the truth about what really happened behind closed doors at Diamond Life. The defense, led by the sharp and relentless attorney Jonathan Pierce, maintained that Marcus Thompson was nothing more than a successful artist being targeted for his lyrics and lifestyle. The courtroom at Crestwood County had become a battleground, and every single day brought new drama. But nothing could have prepared anyone for what happened on that warm June afternoon. The prosecution called their next witness to the stand. His name was Darnell Williams, a young man in his mid-20s who had grown up in the same neighborhood as Marcus Thompson. According to prosecutors, Darnell had been a low-level member of the Diamond Life organization. He had seen things. He knew things, and most importantly, he had agreed to cooperate with the state in exchange for immunity from prosecution. This was supposed to be a turning point in the trial. Darnell's testimony was expected to connect the dots between the music empire and the alleged criminal enterprise. Prosecutors had spent weeks building up to this moment, and the courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious spectators who wanted to see history unfold. Darnell walked into the courtroom slowly, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. He was dressed in a simple grey suit that looked slightly too big for his frame, and his hands trembled as he raised them to take the oath. The bailiff asked him to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Darnell hesitated for just a moment before saying the words. But even as he spoke them, something in his eyes suggested that the truth was the last thing he wanted to share. Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Morrison approached the witness stand with confidence. She had been preparing for this moment for over a year. Her questions started simple, establishing Darnell's background, his connection to the neighborhood, and how he first came to know Marcus Thompson. Darnell answered in short, clipped sentences, barely making eye contact with anyone in the room. Then the questions got harder. Rebecca asked about specific incidents, about meetings he had allegedly attended, about conversations he had supposedly overheard. And that's when everything changed. Darnell went silent. Not just quiet. Completely, utterly silent. Rebecca repeated the question, thinking perhaps he hadn't heard her. But Darnell just sat there, staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched tight. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. You could hear people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The court reporter's fingers hovered over the keys, waiting for words that weren't coming. Finally, Darnell spoke, but not to answer the question. Instead, he said 5 words that sent shockwaves through the entire courtroom. "I'm not saying anything else." Rebecca's face flushed with frustration. She reminded Darnell that he had been granted full immunity, that he had signed agreements, that he was legally obligated to testify. But Darnell didn't budge. His eyes briefly flickered toward the defense table, where Marcus Thompson sat watching with an unreadable expression. Some people in the courtroom later swore they saw fear in Darnell's eyes. Others said it looked more like resignation, like a man who had already made peace with whatever consequences were coming his way. Judge Patricia Hartwell had seen a lot in her 23 years on the bench. She had presided over murder trials, corruption cases, and everything in between. But even she seemed caught off guard by the sudden turn of events. She called for a brief recess to allow the witness to reconsider his position. When court resumed 15 minutes later, nothing had changed. Darnell sat in the same spot, wearing the same expression, offering the same silence. Judge Hartwell's patience had run out. She leaned forward, her voice firm and cold as steel. She explained to Darnell that refusing to testify after being granted immunity was not an option. She warned him that he was putting himself in serious legal jeopardy. She gave him one final chance to comply with the court's orders. Darnell looked down at his hands, took a deep breath, and shook his head. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Hartwell slammed her gavel down hard, demanding order. Then she made her ruling. She found Darnell Williams in contempt of court and ordered him to be taken into custody immediately. He would remain in jail until the following Monday, at which point he would be brought back to court and given another opportunity to testify. If he still refused, he would face additional time behind bars. The bailiffs moved toward Darnell, and for a moment it looked like he might resist. But then his shoulders slumped, and he allowed them to lead him away. As he passed by the gallery, someone in the crowd called out his name. Darnell didn't turn around. He just kept walking, disappearing through the side door that led to the holding cells. The prosecution team exchanged worried glances. This was not how things were supposed to go. Their star witness had just chosen jail over testimony, and everyone in that courtroom knew what that meant. Whatever Darnell Williams knew, he was more afraid of revealing it than he was of sitting in a cell. The defense, meanwhile, tried to suppress their reactions, but there was no hiding the shift in momentum. Jonathan Pierce leaned back in his chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Without Darnell's testimony, the prosecution's case had just developed a massive hole. But the drama was far from over. What happened next would turn an already chaotic situation into something nobody saw coming. As Judge Hartwell prepared to adjourn for the day, one of the prosecutors stood up and requested an emergency sidebar. The judge agreed, and both legal teams approached the bench for a hushed conversation that lasted nearly 10 minutes. When they returned to their seats, the tension in the room had somehow increased even further. Judge Hartwell announced that there were complications that needed to be addressed before the trial could continue. She didn't elaborate, but court watchers and legal experts immediately began speculating about what could have possibly gone wrong. Rumors spread like wildfire outside the courthouse. Some said that Darnell had made allegations against law enforcement. Others claimed that the prosecution's case was falling apart at the seams. A few even suggested that the judge herself had made procedural errors that could jeopardize the entire trial. The truth, as it often does, turned out to be more complicated than any of the rumors. It emerged over the following days that the prosecution had potentially withheld evidence that should have been shared with the defense. Defense attorneys filed emergency motions demanding an investigation into the matter. Suddenly, the focus shifted from Marcus Thompson's alleged crimes to the conduct of those trying to prosecute him. The judge's decision to jail Darnell Williams, while legally sound, had inadvertently shone a spotlight on problems within the case itself. By forcing the confrontation, by demanding that the witness comply or face consequences, Judge Hartwell had created a moment that exposed deeper fractures in the prosecution's strategy. In the days that followed, Darnell remained in custody, refusing to change his position. Monday came and went, and he was brought back before the court. Once again, he declined to testify. The judge extended his contempt finding, and he was returned to his cell. But by that point, the damage had been done. The prosecution's timeline was thrown into chaos. Witnesses scheduled to testify after Darnell had to be rescheduled or skipped entirely. The jury, already exhausted from months of testimony, grew visibly restless. And most importantly, the narrative had shifted. Marcus Thompson's legal team skillfully used the situation to raise questions about the fairness of the entire proceeding. They argued that their client was the victim of overzealous prosecutors who were so desperate for a conviction that they had cut corners and bent rules. The same case that had once seemed like a slam dunk for the state now looked vulnerable. Outside the courthouse, public opinion was equally divided. Some people praised Darnell Williams for his loyalty, viewing his silence as an act of courage in the face of overwhelming pressure. Others condemned him as a coward who was protecting criminals. Supporters of Marcus Thompson held rallies demanding his release, while critics pointed to the serious nature of the charges and insisted that justice must prevail. The case had become about more than just one man. It had become a referendum on the criminal justice system itself, on questions of loyalty and fear, on the power of prosecutors and the rights of defendants. As for Marcus Thompson, he sat through it all with remarkable composure. Those who knew him said he had always believed he would be vindicated. Those who didn't know him could only watch and wonder what was really going on behind those calm, steady eyes. The trial would continue for many more months, with twists and turns that kept the nation captivated. But that afternoon in June, when a judge's order backfired in spectacular fashion, would be remembered as the moment when everything changed. It was a reminder that in the pursuit of justice, nothing ever goes exactly according to plan. It was a reminder that the truth has a way of emerging, even when people try desperately to keep it hidden. And it was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful statement a person can make is to say nothing at all. What do you think about what happened in that courtroom? Was Darnell Williams right to stay silent, or should he have told the truth no matter the consequences? And what does this case tell us about the state of our justice system? The answers aren't easy, but that's exactly why stories like this matter. They force us to confront uncomfortable questions and to examine what we really believe about right and wrong. One thing is certain. In the halls of Crestwood County Courthouse, the echoes of that dramatic afternoon will linger for years to come. And somewhere out there, Darnell Williams sits with the weight of secrets that he chose to carry alone. Whether that makes him a hero or something else entirely depends on who you ask. But his silence spoke louder than any testimony ever could.